Hey, indie filmmakers, I'm Nick Bodmer.
I'm Griffin Hammond, and on this week's episode, we are sharing some of our most frugal filmmaking purchases, many of them under $20.
And answering your questions about neutral density filters, how to fix audio drift, and what features really matter in a new camera.
So Nick, before we get started, I just want to say that we have the best listeners on this show.
I agree, but why specifically are you bringing that up now?
So in our last episode, we talked about the biggest mistakes, mostly that I've made in my career. And do you remember my last mistake where I lost all the gear?
Yes, very sad.
So Sam, one of our listeners from Pennsylvania, noticed that I said I was missing this shock mount that came with my Azden SGM-1X microphone.
This was your favorite shock mount that has ever been shock mounted.
Yeah, it's a simple little shock mount. I like it because it's really low profile and it has a little shoe mount on it. It can go right on the camera. So I use it with other microphones, but I lost that, among other things, at Trump's election night party. And Sam had one that he doesn't use. He didn't have any of the rubber bands, but I have the rubber bands. And he commented on YouTube and said, I can mail that your way. I just got it.
Really? Well, thanks, Sam.
I know. Thank you so much, Sam.
All right, so today we're going to talk about frugal purchases we've made.
Yes. A lot of them are pretty cheap. And actually, when I thought about frugal purchases, I thought about this spreadsheet that you and I created when we first wanted to buy camera gear together. That's how frugal we were, is that we were buying it together.
Yeah, splitting the cost because we could not afford to do it on our own.
And it was actually my friend Adam. We were talking about buying cameras together, you and I, on the podcast a couple episodes ago. And Adam said, hey, I think I have access to this spreadsheet that you guys created. So I pulled it back up, and I think we'll share this in the show notes. So if you want to go to Hey.film, you could see the prices and links and the actual stuff that we got started with.
So what year was this? Does it say on the file when we created this?
Yeah, this was the beginning of 2010. So
7 years ago.
Yeah, we bought a GH1, Panasonic GH1 camera. We bought a Zoom H4n audio recorder.
Still holding it right now.
Yeah. We bought an extra battery. We bought SD cards, the Transcend 16 gigabyte cards. And then actually that was the stuff that you ordered, Nick. And then I ordered other things so that we were splitting this perfectly. I ordered a Panasonic TM700 camcorder, the Azden SGM-1X shotgun mic, a camera bag, something called the Ultra Compact, which was a shoulder rig by Indie Systems.
Yep.
Do we even still have that?
I don't. If it would be you, because I think that when we split ways, that went with you.
Yeah, and I think I sold it because it was pretty heavy. And nowadays I go with
steel.
Yeah, it was really heavy. It was nice for like if you wanted to mount all your stuff around the camera like a cage.
Yeah,
but it's just big. And so I replaced it with. I really like the Reflex shoulder rig for when I need a shoulder rig.
And then various other sundries, basically.
Yeah, so our total here
total
was $2,900 is what we spent in 2010 to like get started in video.
That was a lot of money for us, even splitting it. We had to come up with $1,500.
But it was also, we decided this was the way to go. This was the frugal way to go because at the time it was going to cost like $4,000 to get an HD camcorder that had, XLR inputs that could do all the stuff that we were piecing together. This was a cheaper way to go.
Yeah, I remember you telling me, we should look at getting this mirrorless camera instead of a camcorder, and I thought you were just nuts until I did a little research, and it turned out, actually, that's where things were going. You were pretty ahead of the game there.
Yep, I'm ahead of the curve.
So how long did we split this gear for?
Wasn't it only like 6 months? And then we like bought each other out and started to like piece together our own systems?
I think so, yeah. It was, we weren't living in the same city even, so there was like driving and meeting halfway for swapping gear when we had events to shoot and things like that.
Yeah. Well, and the big thing we really need each other for were to have 2 tripods for events, because we each had our own Manfrotto tripod.
Which we bought in high school back in like 2000 or something like that.
And I think I've sold mine, but you still have yours?
I'm using it right now. Yeah, that's what's holding the camera as we speak.
This is like that old, it's like silver in color.
Yeah, it's got a fluid head on it. I mean, it was really nice when we got it. They were expensive for us in high school. I think it's like a $300 or $400 tripod, maybe.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I think with the head and everything, maybe it was around $300.
Best $300 I've ever spent. I mean, I've literally been using it for over 15 years, and it's still going strong. So that's pretty good.
I can't remember why I got rid of mine. I mean, I remember it held up, but I replaced it with a slightly nicer Manfrotto that I still use and have had that for maybe 5 or 6 years, and I'm happy with the quality of that.
I think you wanted ones with the leg quick releases that just pull up instead of having these. You have to unscrew, and it's just a little slower to set up and take down.
Yeah. So another one of the things that is on that original list that's pretty cheap but was useful is one of these 1/8 inch to XLR adapters. I guess we found one for $10.
$9.50, yeah.
Actually, that might not even have been 1/8 inch, because 1/8 inch is like the normal headphone size jack. But I think back then on the GH1, it had the sub mini, the 3/32 jack.
Yep.
So you need a special adapter.
And we went from XLR to that. Is that right?
Yeah, I don't know what mic.
To hook up the Azden. That Azden SGM1X is a XLR mic, right?
So to this day, that's still like one of my frugal purchases. Is I always have one of these 1/8 inch to XLR adapters. I think I got one from B&H that's like $20 by a company called Kopul or something, Kopul, and I use it for especially getting nat sound. Like if I want to put a nice microphone on top of my camera. This is one reason why I need that shock mount that can mount on top of my camera. Or in a pinch, if I need to do interviews, but I just don't have an audio recorder with me, I'll rely on that. But I gotta ask you, as a sound guy, is it like sacrilege to do that, to convert XLR?
Well, you're going from a balanced connector to an unbalanced, so you can't do it over any distance, right?
Oh, okay.
XLR cables are really good for long distance running, and if you were to convert to that over a long run, you'd introduce a ton of noise. But over a real short one, right from the camera to the mic, it's probably fine.
And I have occasionally had problems with that. Like, I don't trust that connection. An XLR connection is real strong and it's not going anywhere. The 1/8 inch will spin inside the camera and can introduce a little bit of noise. So it's not the ideal way to do it, but I feel like I can get away with that.
Yeah, you give a little bit up for being frugal, but it certainly helps.
And I even made one of these adapters once. I was able to solder my own. Like, it's also something you can just build.
That's gonna work really well. No noise gets introduced with your custom soldered adapter.
So
but you save $9.50 by soldering it yourself.
Yeah, I mean, well, that's the thing. There are limits to being frugal. Like, it's good to save money where you can, but clearly, if you're taking up your own time, taking away from time you could be making videos, you could spend $20 on a cable. We also spent $20 on these pop filters that we're using on the podcast.
Yeah, that you probably should have spent maybe $30. These are pretty terrible.
Yeah. So not every frugal purchase is good.
No. I mean, I think the pop filters, are doing their pop filtering just fine. It's the clamp that it's got is just garbage. I mean, it's a little bit of a process to get it clamped to my table and adjusted. Now I just can't touch
and
it.
It doesn't stay where it is. Like, every time we start the podcast, I have to like do this weird maneuver where I'm like moving the pop filter around, trying to stretch it above the mic just so it will sit. I can't do it.
Well,
I'm messing with it right now.
Until it breaks, we'll keep using it, but then we'll spend a little more money.
But I also wonder, like, this just looks like pantyhose, the pop filter. Like, can you just make one of these yourself?
I don't know. That's a good question. It's 2 layers, though. It seems.
I'm still messing with that. I can't get it back in the right spot. There we go. See, this is why I like spending the right amount of money on gear. You know, if your gear, like, I love on my tripod, I have the center column that you can untighten and level the camera real quick.
Mm-hmm.
And it cost $100 just for that center column. So not a very frugal purchase, but I think about how much time I save not having to adjust each leg independently just to get a level adjustment on my tripod.
Yeah, one of the first things I did was buy a bunch of quick release plates and use them for all my tripods and like my glide cam and get that all the same. And these quick release plates by Manfrotto are just ridiculously expensive, but it's so nice to have everything standardized and be able to just swap cameras around on whatever tripod or whatever you've got.
Are you talking about those little Manfrotto ones, like on the tripod you have?
Yeah.
See, I have like the slightly bigger one for I have the 701 HDV head. But one thing I did was I did want to standardize and put the same quick release plate on everything, but those Manfrotto ones were like $50 each. So I ended up going with this different one by Giados that was $30 each because I had to get like 5 of them. So that was my slight cost savings.
Yeah. But it's just nice that they're all the same because then everything just works all the time and you're not finding, oh crap, I can't put this camera on this tripod unless I swap things around. That's never good, especially when you're doing a live event.
So one of my favorite Frugal pieces of gear, and a lot of people who listen probably already know this, for mounting cameras and other things, is that Pedco Ultra Clamp.
Yep, you do sing its praises.
I need to get like a Pedco sponsorship.
I think half your Instagram feed is just, ways you're using your clamp.
Yeah, I think at a shoot recently, I was using one to mount the camera. I was using one to mount the audio recorder. I was using one to mount a microphone. I have 3 of them now. And I noticed the price is even lower. It just keeps getting lower. I think when I bought these, they were $25, but now it's like $16.71 on P&H.
I guess I should buy a couple, but I don't have any.
Well, and a lot of these things we're talking about today, they're all... I mean, I'll put the links to these things in the show notes at Hey.film if you want to check them out. But you can also always go to griffinhammond.com/gear, and I just keep a list of the stuff. So if you're curious about what I use, it's all right there.
Perfect. Do you know how much your total gear setup is worth right now, of the stuff you use regularly?
I mean, I just assume I'm always carrying around $10,000 worth of gear, which sounds crazy. But when you think about, like, each camera body, maybe $2,000, and the lenses are approaching $1,000, and you have a $250 audio recorder and a $300 microphone, it adds up pretty quick.
Yeah, it certainly does.
But those Pedco Ultra clamps, I carry 3 of those in my bag, and they are not...
Never worry about it.
They're not driving that price up too much.
What else have I bought? I bought a slider for $100. That was
Which one was that?
I don't know. I was trying to look it up in my email. I bought it so long ago, I don't even remember what brand it was. But it's just like a piece of like aluminum with a plastic thing. So it wasn't real smooth or super fancy. For $100 with a steady hand and a little stabilization, it works pretty good.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, I can't imagine at that price point that it was that great. Because I've not experienced a lot of great sliders. They're usually a little bit jerky.
It was a little jerky and janky, but you just try it 10 times to get your little slide shot and do it in slow motion, and it'll be fine.
Now, when I think about Frugal stuff, I remember you bought the like cheapest looking shoulder mount on Amazon or something by Cowboy Studio.
Cowboy Studio, yeah. That was one of those purchases where you buy it and then you use it once and you say, yeah, that was just total garbage. I'm never using that again. It was just a piece of crap. So.
But I've heard good things because, like, I think because of the price point, people like it. Like, is it good for $30?
I guess so. I mean, I think I determined in the end I don't really want to run events on my shoulder. Everything should be on a tripod. It's just easier that way. So that was an early decision I made. Is I'm not going to be shooting handheld too much during events.
Well, yeah. The more I go and the more I get comfortable shooting handheld. A lot of times I'll throw a shoulder bag on and put, audio gear and stuff in the shoulder bag. I don't necessarily need everything on my shoulder with the camera. Right. I find that there's only a couple situations now, like when I'm doing a handheld interview, if I'm going to do a lot of them, it can be useful to have a shoulder rig just to kind of stabilize me. But normally I don't need it.
I did buy a glide cam. I think it's a HD 2000 glide cam. Did you have a glide cam?
Yeah, I have that same one right now, yeah.
Yeah. I'm trying. Was that Frugal? Those aren't particularly cheap. They were a little expensive, right?
Yeah, I mean, it must have cost $400 or $500.
Yeah, but that's a great piece of gear. I mean, that thing is just really well built, really easy to balance, and got some great footage out of it all the time.
Although I kind of imagine that these days you can probably get something not far off from that price range that's actually an electronic gimbal.
Gosh, that stuff looks so cool. I remember when those first started coming out a couple of years ago, where they use like the remote control car parts, basically, right, to stabilize things with gyros. And now you can get them super cheap. Didn't GoPro do one?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, a whole bunch of people have different gimbals now.
I'm surprised you don't have one, actually.
It's one of those things. A lot of people have gimbals and sliders, and I look at a lot of people's work and I think, man, I'm jealous. Everyone's work is so beautiful and stable, but I realize as an editor, I don't even like to linger on shots that long to appreciate how beautiful they are. Like, I like to cram in a lot of shots, and I've just come to terms that my style is quick and handheld's okay, and there's different energy that I do. I'm just not like the beautiful video guy like a lot of people. So I don't think I need all those things.
Yeah. I recommend putting a vignette on every shot. That really will help the beauty. All right, what else we got? I'm looking at my list.
I was thinking about my cheapest lens that I ever got.
What is it?
It's a Panasonic 14mm f2.5. It's like one of those like pancake lenses. Really.
I have that lens too.
Well, you have the 20mm, don't you?
And the 14.
Oh, you have the 14 as well.
Yeah.
And I know that the 14 is supposed to retail for like $250 or $260, but I'm pretty sure I got mine on eBay for $160.
Yeah, I've gotten a bunch of lenses on eBay like that. I think they're gray market, meaning like I don't think the U.S. warranty is valid. So like if it had a defect, I think you'd be in trouble. But that's definitely a way to save some money on lenses.
Yeah, I don't know what the origin story of mine was. But I don't even think it was used. I think, who knows where it was from.
Yeah. Well, and used lenses are great too, as long as they've been well cared for. Why not, right?
Well, that's one thing I found is that lenses generally hold on to their value. Like, you can buy a lens and then use it for 2 years and then sell it after 2 years for pretty much the same price. Like, you can rent a lens for free if you're just buying them used, because if you buy them new and then you sell them used, it's like a car. They drop all that value.
Yeah, but then they hold it.
Yeah.
Did you see, I just saw this announced this week, Apple has bundled together all their pro apps like Final Cut and Motion and Logic.
I did see that. I read that on No Film School.
Okay, yeah.
That it's $100 off now. It was, normally it's $300 for Final Cut. That's what I paid for it several years ago. But now if you're a student, or really anyone who works for a school, has a school email address, you can get Final Cut, Motion, Compressor, and Logic all for $200.
Which is great, because Final Cut alone is $300. And what's Logic? Logic's $300 too, isn't it?
I think it's $200 or $300. I think it's $200.
And then Motion and Compressor are $50 each, I think.
Yes, you're getting a bunch of stuff for like half price, essentially.
And obviously, we both edit on Final Cut, so we're fans.
Yeah.
I don't use Motion very much. I think I own it.
I think I own it as well, but I never use Motion. I use After Effects for the few things that I know how to do, like warp stabilizer, and sometimes I'll track some text or something. And actually, I don't even use Compressor anymore. I've really taken to Adobe Media Encoder.
Really?
Yeah.
Maybe I should give that a try. I still use Compressor.
I got used to using it at Bloomberg, and now it works really well. But I realize the price that I've paid for Final Cut, like now that I'm finally paying for Creative Cloud, I'm paying $50 a month just to have all the Adobe pieces of software. But I've had Final Cut for 67 months, and they've updated it so many times. Each update is a pretty nice update. They usually fix a lot of things and make it better. And I've never had to pay more for it. So I've actually only paid $4.46 a month for 67 months.
And that price keeps going down every month. Yeah, good value. Good value. That's why Adobe switched, right? They're going to extract a lot more dollars out of you than Apple did for that software.
Yeah, but arguably, depending on what you need, if you only need one piece of software, you can get it for $20 a month with Creative Cloud. Or if you're a student, I think you can get a $20 subscription to the whole Creative Cloud, $20 a month. So if you only need it for a short term, then that could save you money over $300 for Final Cut.
Absolutely. Yeah, I've got a free year of Creative Cloud. I forget, I got it through work or something, so I'm using that right now.
Wow.
Which is nice.
Lucky you.
I know, right? It's got to work in enterprise IT, get free stuff.
Another reason to have a job that's not necessarily in video production.
There you go. What else are we going to talk about here? I think every episode I'm going to mention my crappy wireless transmitters I bought by Azden that were just total garbage. Don't spend the money on crappy wireless gear.
How much were those?
I think it was like $100.
And where are they now? Do you throw them away? Or do you have them?
I think I have them, but I don't ever use them. Yeah, I didn't. No, I did sell them. I sold them on eBay.
Yeah.
I think I got $25 for them or something. I ripped somebody off.
And that's actually, I'm going through that now, is kind of taking an inventory of my stuff and just deciding what's the stuff I'm not using anymore, and realizing there are some things that a lens that I've just had sitting around for 3 years. I just sold my 30 millimeter Sigma lens. It was a 4/3 lens. I don't even think they make 4/3 lenses anymore.
No, they don't. Well, if you want to get rid of one of those pre-production GH5s, you've got my address.
Nope, still using those.
In just a moment, we're answering questions about audio drift, why sometimes your audio and video lose sync over time, which neutral density filter you need for sunlight, and which features matter in a new camera.
Hey, Indie Filmmakers is brought to you by Tongle, the website where there are currently several active projects that filmmakers can make money on. Whether you're pitching your concept and your services as a filmmaker, or even just coming up with the idea for a video, both pitch winners and chosen idea creators get paid.
There are over 120,000 writers, animators, and filmmakers in the Tongle creative community, and you can be one of them by visiting tongle.com. That's TONGAL.com.
Our first question today comes from a YouTube comment from Joshua Morgan, and he asks, he uses the Rode NTG2 shotgun mic with a Zoom H5 recorder to get audio, very similar to my setup most of the time. He's shooting with a Canon T3i, and he slates every shot. He claps or something like that and tries to sync them in post. But even when he starts with a sync with the clap, it seems like his audio drifts over time. And over a long interview or whatever he's shooting, the sync is getting off.
Why would that be, Griffin? Any ideas?
So I think there's two things that may be causing this. One is, on my H5, I always record in 48 kilohertz.
Mm-hmm.
Does that matter?
It does matter. That's the sample rate. It's how many times per second it's, getting an audio amplitude level. And when you have differing sample rates, that's when drift really can become a problem.
And so, like, the standard sample rate for video is usually 48 kilohertz. But the audio recorder can also do 44.1, or is it 41?
I think it's 44.1.
So that's one thing that I wonder. You should check that. But also, I wonder, it could be possible, depending on how your Canon T3i shoots video, I wonder if maybe he's shooting 30p video, like exactly 30 on the camera. Or maybe he's shooting exactly 29.97 on the camera, and he's editing in a 30p timeline. So
causing
maybe
it to stretch a little bit, maybe.
Yeah, maybe the editing software is playing the video at a slightly different rate, just barely over time, and the audio would get out of sync.
Yeah. And I found, like, when I would do long weddings or something where I would have, hour and a half long shots and recordings, some drift is inevitable. Even when you're on the same refresh rate, the little clocks and quartz crystals in these things that set that timing are going to be slightly different from device to device. So sometimes you just have to resync at a midpoint. Now, if you're noticing drift like immediately, like in the first few minutes, you've definitely got something weird going on. But I think over really long shots, like maybe 1 second of drift at over an hour or two is something you just kind of have to watch out for.
And I've heard that some devices are worse than others. Like, obviously professional video equipment should be pretty good at this, but like an iPhone might not be great at timing. a recording.
Well, and professional equipment, you have something called time code. So there's a device basically that acts as the master clock, if you will, for all the devices. They're all synced to one time code, and that keeps everything in perfect sync because all the devices have a common timing to work off of. Usually at our Frugal level, our equipment doesn't support that. I think the H4n probably does. Does it?
Actually, I don't know. I've never used the time code on there.
I've never used it either, but...
and I feel like it's been years since I've run into that problem. I've definitely had that problem of audio drift. And I think the way I fixed it was I just kind of like did some math and, I found a new sync point near the end and realized, okay, it's off by this many seconds and this many frames, and I could just do a stretch, a rate stretch that's, the perfect rate to get them back in sync.
Yeah. Griffin loves editing with spreadsheets. We've covered that.
All right, our next question was also a YouTube comment that comes from El Shikiatrak.
Hey, now that was an impressive pronunciation. I was looking at that saying, I'm not saying that one.
I took that one for you. He's wondering how I get clean audio with my Rode NTG3. In fact, that was the microphone, my shotgun microphone, my nice shotgun microphone that I shot the last podcast. I didn't have my podcasting microphone with me, so I just used the shotgun. He also has this microphone, but says he doesn't get the same results that I get. But I know you know the answer, Nick.
I do?
You always say this is what you preach about microphones.
Getting it close?
Yeah, I gotta think it's the closeness.
Well, yeah, we'll have to ask him if that's what it is.
One thing I often do is I prefer to shoot with wide lenses. It's just a look I like. In fact, for those of you watching on YouTube right now, I'm shooting this with a 12 millimeter lens, and it stretches distance. So this mic right now, this podcasting mic, is pretty close to my face, but the shot makes it look like it's a 1.5 feet away when it's a little bit closer than that. The shotgun mic, I can usually put it below me, and if I have the camera just a little bit above my eye line and it's a wide angle lens, or if it's just a really tight shot on me, I can get it in real close and it disappears from the shot. So I wonder if his is just farther away. If it's 2 feet away, it might sound half as good.
Let me ask, is the Rode NTG3 a condenser or a dynamic mic?
I think it's a condenser, right? Is that what a shotgun is?
Do you have to send phantom power to it?
You do have to send phantom power.
So this is actually a dumb question on my part. Does it even function at all without phantom power? Is that even a potential? No. It doesn't work without phantom power.
Yeah, I don't think it works.
Okay. So he's probably got his phantom power on. That's good.
Yeah. But I also, I mean, you should also think about reverb. Like right now in this room, I've put up a blanket on the wall behind me, hopefully to just stop a little bit of reflection of this audio. I've even taken my iMac next to me and tilted it upward, thinking maybe if my voice bounces off of it, less of it will come back and hit the microphone.
And whereas I have done nothing, again, I forgot to treat the room at all before I started recording. So, sorry.
Well, you have 3 kids to contend with.
I do, but they're not screaming right now. They were minutes before we started recording, so they're hopefully asleep at this point.
So I don't know. I guess put the microphone close. Try to consider what else might be interfering. But I mean, the farther away your mic is, the more noise that's your signal to noise ratio. The more noise you'll have compared to the actual signal that you want, and you'll have to contend with that.
And always a good question, how are you connecting the microphone to the recorder? Again, if you're using some sort of adapter to an 1/8 inch or a 1/4 inch and dropping that balanced cable down to an unbalanced line and running it over any kind of distance, you can certainly introduce a lot of noise that way. So,
and is this true? I've always thought you weren't supposed to run XLR cables or maybe any audio cables perpendicular over a power source?
Power cables, yeah. Anytime you have audio cabling that has to cross over a power source, you want to do it perpendicularly.
Oh, you do want to do it perpendicularly.
Yeah, you want to cross at 90-degree angles.
Oh man, I've been doing it wrong. Actually, I think I've been keeping them separate.
That's always going to be best. Again, a balanced line like an XLR is going to be much better at rejecting that kind of noise, but you can definitely introduce like a 60 cycle hum or something from the AC. Next question from Mark Bresnick. Why aren't you uploading in 4K 60p anymore? It looks so good.
Well, yeah, we did our promo for this podcast in 4K 60p using the GH5. Maybe our first episode. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think we did in 4K 60p. We were both together in Las Vegas. I'm not sure people necessarily know that we're not always together for this podcast. We're rarely together.
Rarely.
I'm in New York, you're in Las Vegas.
That's right.
But that's part of it, is that when we're not together, you don't have a camera, Nick, that can shoot 4K 60p.
Not yet, Panasonic.
But also, here's the thing. We would shoot these 30-minute episodes in 4K 60p. I'm editing it that way. But then the exporting process takes forever. 4K is 4 times bigger than 1080, and 60, of course, is twice as much as the number of frames you really need for something like this. And then I have to take all that extra time to transcode it, and then I have to take all that extra time to upload it to YouTube, and then all that extra time for YouTube to process it. It seemed like it was taking an entire day just to get this thing online.
Yeah, and these are not short videos, so I'm assuming the file sizes are pretty big when you export.
Yeah. So right now I'm doing 1080, 30p. That's how I'm shooting it right now. There's no reason to do overkill for this.
Also, this is a podcast, folks, right? This is
right.
Audio. If you're watching on YouTube, you're doing it wrong. I'm a podcast guy, trust me.
People should definitely watch this on YouTube, Nick. They can consume this wherever they want.
I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. I'm sorry, everybody.
You've offended everyone. You've offended the largest portion of our audience. But it's an important point that not every project needs the highest frame rate, the highest resolution, the best camera. I mean, when I worked at Bloomberg, I was working in television news, and our editors couldn't even handle 4K. The infrastructure for all the editors in our building were editing in 1080. So to give them 4K just meant they were going to have to transcode it down to 1080 anyway. There were times to do that, but not everything I shot needed to be in 4K because it wouldn't always make it to air that way.
Yep, and just slow you down.
Yeah, it just makes everything more difficult.
All right, next is a YouTube comment from Assassin424. He's wondering, he's going to be shooting with a 50mm f1.8 in morning sunlight. What ND filter should he use if he's using a 1/50th shutter speed?
So I used to have, I still have a variable ND. A neutral density filter, for those of you who don't know, is I always call it sunglasses. It's just to darken the shot, especially outside, so that you can use larger apertures if you want to get the shallow depth of field, but outside. I also use them for time lapses because I need to use long exposures and get the shot a lot darker to handle that. So I have a variable ND filter, which can be nice, especially for something like morning sunrise, because you may be dealing with a bunch of different exposure levels when the sun starts to come up. So having a little bit of variation could be useful. But I've found that I've started using just like static ND filters. One, because they're thinner, but there's really only two that I use. One is I don't even know what it's called, but it stops down the camera 1000x, like 1/1000th of the light comes through, and that's my time-lapse ND filter. But that would be too crazy dark for video. So then I use something called an ND 0.9, or sometimes it's called an ND3. It stops it down 3 stops, which is 1/8 of the light. And that seems to do me pretty well for outdoor stuff in sunlight.
Cool. And you obviously have to make sure the ND filter is the right size for the lens you're using, right?
Yeah. So one frugal thing I've done recently is, because I decided to go with these slightly more expensive ND filters by B+W, that's the brand. I like them, but I realized I didn't want to have to buy one for all my lenses. So the much cheaper option was just buying one big one at a 70mm size, or 77mm size for my largest lens. And then I just got a bunch of these step-up rings. Here's what they sound like when you tap them together. But this just lets me put my largest ND filter on all my lenses because I bought a few of these like $5 step-up rings, and now I can put them on every lens I have.
And we all know from last episode that you like breaking ND filters, so...
Yeah, well, I have to keep these ones protected in my little wallet. I don't even keep them in like a fancy case. Just put them in a regular leather wallet. So here's an email that we received from Chris. I feel like this is a thought exercise that a lot of people go through when looking at new cameras. He has listed a bunch of features about a new camera, and he's kind of wondering if we could weigh in, kind of order them, like which ones are most important. So he's listed here resolution, like 4K or 1080 sort of stuff, frame rates, 60p, 24p, does it shoot even higher, like 180 like the GH5, bit rate, is that important? Intra versus interframe compression, is that important? Color compression, like 10-bit and 422, dynamic range, and ergonomics. So do any of those stand out to you, Nick, as like the top?
Well, I wouldn't say all those are exactly what I'm looking for when I look for a camera. Ergonomics is up there when you're shooting live events. Dynamic range, I might tweak that a little bit and talk about low light performance.
Yeah.
For the kind of stuff I'm doing, low light performance is one of the most important things for me. So if we're going to include that in dynamic range, I'd put that up there. You know, for the most part, most of that stuff, I just want a camera that gets out of my way and takes good footage. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I think you're smart to put ergonomics pretty high up, and just general like usability. Like I think of a camera like the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera. I picked it up because it was a really exciting camera several years ago. It shoots ProRes. It has really great dynamic range. It's supposed to be wonderful for colorists, but it's just a hard camera to use. So the batteries don't last very long. The menu system is hard. It's like hard to change the ISO level. Like things that you would want to change quickly while you're running around shooting are just difficult on that camera. So it could like check all the boxes, but if it's hard to use, then what good is it at least for me?
Yeah, and I think he's right. He pointed out that it might depend on what type of filmmaking you're doing, and I think that's exactly right. The Pocket Cinema camera might have been great for shooting narrative stuff.
I think it's probably a great studio camera when you have a lot of control and you can plug it in, or maybe your takes aren't that long. Like it's not great for interviews, but probably for a short film, it could be really good.
Yep, absolutely.
But I think one thing to consider here, and I think this list makes it apparent, is that there's not going to be any camera that's going to do everything perfectly. You're not going to get a camera that has like the highest resolution and the highest frame rate and the highest bit rate and the best dynamic range. There is no perfect camera out there, and I worry when I see the way that people talk about cameras in forums that they're waiting for the perfect one. They look at the Panasonic GH5 and they say, well, but if only it was a full frame camera as well. It's like, well, if it was a full frame camera, it's not going to do the other things. Like Panasonic's not going to scrap what they have going and like start from scratch. So there's never going to be the perfect camera, and if you keep waiting for it, you're never going to make your film. So I think you do have to kind of look at this list and say, well, what's really important to me? And I think for me, resolution is important. Like when I look at like bit rate or intra versus interframe compression, I'm not sure I can see the difference between intra, like all eye compression or not. And I definitely can't really tell the difference between 10-bit and 8-bit color. I mean, you might want that if you're a colorist or if you're doing visual effects like green screening, or if you're pushing the image a lot, you might need it. But like my monitor is only 8-bit, so I'm not gonna be able to see the difference between 8-bit and 10-bit. I think I find that resolution is the biggest quality indicator. Like clearly, if you're shooting 4 times as many pixels in 4K than 1080, you're getting a lot more detail.
And flexibility, right? Even if you're delivering in 1080, just shooting in 4K gives you a lot of room to work.
Yeah, it even just looks nicer when you shoot in 4K and then edit in 1080. Just having those extra pixels to start with, I seem to get a better product out the other end.
Yep.
So resolution is really important. Getting the right frame rate, obviously. I mean, if you need a camera that shoots slow motion, If you need 180 frames for the project you're making, then you need a camera that can do that.
But again, you know, your skills and time practicing is really what makes a difference. I think if you give me a GH5 and you give Griffin a GH2, Griffin's still going to create better stuff than me. The camera can only do so much.
I appreciate you saying that. Off to the challenge.
All right, you get a VHS camera.
Okay,
then I'll win. Visit Hey.film for this episode's show notes. On our site, you'll also find links to many of the other ways you can listen to or watch this podcast.
Plus, Nick, did you see that I made a Twitter account for this podcast?
I didn't. I didn't even read ahead in the script that far. Look at that. I said we needed a Twitter account.
Yeah, I know. I did it for you.
You kind of shot me down. I thought you shot me down.
Well, I was worried that no one would follow a Twitter account just for the podcast if they can already follow me. But it's out there now. It's at Hey.film Podcast. So now I need you guys to follow it to prove me wrong.
Yeah. I need the password. I'm going to be replying to people like it's nobody's business.
Yeah, I should just make that your account. You'll hear from us next week when Nick and I are both together recording in New York City, where we'll be talking about wedding video production.
To get you ready for Valentine's Day, when you probably know somebody getting engaged and can earn some new business.
Thanks for listening.
Oh, I'm sorry. We've stepped out of the show, haven't we?
We're breaking the fourth wall.
Just broke the fourth wall.